Alright folks, today we're going to be talking about layers of the rainforest. We're going to be looking at each individual layer, how much sunlight each layer receives, and some of the common animals that are found there. So this will be a relatively short video. Alright, let's go ahead and begin. So, most of us have probably peeled an onion, and if not, they do have, onions and rainforests do have something in common. And just like an onion, rainforests are made up of layers. So if you've ever cut an onion or peeled an onion, there's one layer underneath that, and then so forth and so forth. Well, in the rainforest, there are 4 layers, and here are their names. We have the emergent layer, which is the highest layer, the canopy layer, which is the second highest layer, the understory layer, which is the third one, and then you could call it the forest floor or the rainforest floor, and that's obviously the ground. Now what we're going to do, we're going to look at each individual layer to learn about each one of them. Alright, as I said before, each layer has its own animals, plants, and it even receives different amounts of sunlight. Depending on how much sunlight can actually determine what animals live in each layer and what types of plants are found there. The first one we're going to be looking at is the emergent layer. So if you look at the picture on the left, it is this one right here. And this is the region or layer we're going to be focusing on this slide. Now, as you can see on the picture on the left, this level is the highest of the rainforest. These are where the oldest trees are found and some of the tallest. Some of the trees can get as high as 200 feet, which is very, very tall. Because it's so high up, it actually also receives the most sunlight, and you can see that on the little diagram on the left. It receives the most sunlight, and as I mentioned earlier, it includes some of the tallest trees. Now, some common animals may include, because of the height of these trees, include your eagles, bats, large birds of prey or birds, and even butterflies. And once again, that makes sense, since those types of animals tend to live in higher places. Alright, the next one we'll call the upper canopy, or simply the canopy, and this is the middle layer. As you can see, it receives the second most amount of sunlight, and it's very, very thick. Alright, so this layer has a thick rainforest leaf covering. As you can see at the picture, it is very, very thick. So most of the leaves are concentrated here. Now, it does have less sunlight than the emergent layer, because the emergent layer ends up blocking a lot of the sunlight, but they still do receive a huge percentage of it. This is the area. Now, some common animals may include monkeys, sloths, tree frogs, and many, many more. This is where most animals tend to live, just because it's high off the ground. The Amazon does tend to flood, and to keep them off the ground from predators such as jaguars, snakes, crocodiles, and so forth. The next layer we have is the third layer, and this is known as the understory or the lower canopy, depending on how you want to call it. Now this layer, as we continue to go down these layers, tends to get less sunlight, and you can see that on the picture on the left. Now, this region only gets roughly about 15% of sunlight. So it gets a lot less than the emergent and the upper canopy. Now the canopy blocks the sunlight from getting through, creates kind of an umbrella effect. And because it kind of traps, and there's not a lot of wind going through here, it can actually get very, very hot, and it gets humid because that heat doesn't move as much, because the leaves and the vegetation block wind. Now, you do have some animals, and these animals tend to live here just because it gets them off the ground, especially when it floods. So you have snakes, frogs, insects, and even the occasional jaguar. And this is mainly where you're stuck with tree trunks, vines, and some maybe tall ferns or plants. Alright, and the last one you have is the forest floor, which, as the name states, is the forest floor. Alright, now this region, depending on where you are in the rainforest, receives little to no sunlight throughout the day. And you can see here, it does receive the least amount of sunlight. Because there is little to no sunlight, little to no plants grow here because of the lack of sun. And most animals that tend to live here tend to be your four-legged animals: armadillos, tapirs, insects, anteaters, iguanas, and so forth. Just because it's closer to the ground, they can eat, they can find their food and things like that. And obviously humans, if they live here, they tend to live on the forest floor. And that kind of covers this mini video. Now, just to quickly review some of the things that we highlighted in this video. We talked about how 4 layers can be found in a rainforest. We talked about how each one of those are the emergent layer, the canopy, the understory or lower canopy, and the forest floor. And those are our 4 main layers. We also covered in this video how each layer has certain levels of sunlight and specific animals that live on each of these layers. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, but that concludes this video. Thank you.